G'day and welcome. Part of my last video touched on game plans as one of the key elements of strategy in MtG deck building. I want to go deeper into that idea today. In this video, I'll be going over the deck building implications of your game plan in a bit more detail. To recap, a game plan is an umbrella term for the things you want your deck to do over the course of a game. This can vary from matchup to matchup and even before and after sideboarding, but that's for another time to get into. When I'm building decks, I usually try to think about how I want games to start and how I want games to end, because those are the easiest parts to keep consistent. The early game plan is simple enough. If you always want a creature on turn 1, you need to make sure you have enough 1-mana creatures that you'll be guaranteed to have one in your opening hand. You can work that out with the calculator, no problem. The part that I find gives people trouble is how to end the game. It's easy to look at a big thing which came down and say that that's what did it. This is especially true in Commander, where cards like Craterhoof Behemoth and Torment of Hailfire often spell GG. But it also applies to 1v1 formats, where that big spell is a more relatively subdued Quantum Riddler, Ugin, or Pyrogoyf. Now, don't get me wrong, these cards are all very good ways to end a game in your favor, but it's tempting to see that and think that you win the game by resolving a specific card. It goes much deeper than that. Adding a handful of win condition cards to your deck will tend to make it weaker unless you first understand how your deck manages resources. Many decks have been built whose game plan had good intentions but no mention of resources, and this leads a lot of them to fall down in ways which are hard to diagnose. So let's start by understanding our approach to those resources, starting with the two fundamentals, cards and mana. There are others, but I call these fundamental resources because everything else builds out of them, and you can't inherently spend life to progress the game. Control decks are probably the decks with the clearest resource-focused end state. A control deck typically wins a game by reducing their opponent to 0 cards in hand, while the control player keeps as full of a grip as possible. In this position, it's very easy to convert literally any amount of game-ending pressure into a win. But how does this apply to other types of deck? Well, here's a question that I promise is related. If the control deck only needs a few turns with a big threat, why is the number of cards they have at the end of the game important? It isn't. There are no bonus points for still having all these, even if there is tilt equity from showing your opponent all the good stuff you didn't even need to beat them. It's all about planning for how you'll spend resources, not accumulate them. The control deck's plan is to spend the same number of cards as their opponent until the opponent runs out, but the control deck still has things left over. That's when they can turn the corner, because now they can spend more resources than their opponent. With that framing, it's very clear how resources factor into, for example, an aggro game plan. Spend resources faster than your opponent and end the game before they catch up to you. Every card your opponent had in their hand when they died is a resource that didn't matter in the game. It's why curving out is so important for an aggressive strategy to work as well. When you only have so many cards to play, you want each of them to do as much as your mana can possibly allow. Knowing your ideal endgame, you can start figuring out what resources you'll need and where you can get them. Don't overthink it. Many decks are happy to say, I'll get my mana from my land drops and my cards from my draw step, one each every turn, the way Garfield intended. But thinking about it a bit can help you to spot better solutions. Also, the reverse can be true. If you're building around a certain resource engine, that can inform your goal for the endgame. Let's compare two decks which love spending lots of mana and see how they differ. Tron is a classic archetype which leverages Urza's Mine, Urza's Tower, and Urza's Power Plant to make 7 mana very quickly. Because it can jump the curve by so much, its cards are very polarized between ways to spend a little mana and ways to spend a lot of mana. Expedition Map is the all-star here. Sitka can spend all your mana over the first 2 turns to hit 7 mana on exactly turn 3. At that point, the Tron deck can cast huge haymakers which generate card advantage and chain them into each other and win the game. On the flip side, Blue Moon is a control deck with a curve which theoretically tops out at about 5, but it's actually much, much greedier for mana than Tron, since being able to cast a draw spell and a removal spell and a threat in the same turn cycle is very good. But because the deck is already planning to spend its mana drawing cards, it's super reasonable to get there 1 land drop at a time. It plays much cheaper effects than Tron on average, since it needs to be able to start doing its thing before it has infinite mana. And this is why people emphasize ramp and card draw so much when talking about building for Commander. Magic was balanced around 1v1 20 life formats for over 20 years, so the resources the game naturally gives you can actually be enough to win those types of games. but it's really hard to outspend 3 whole opponents, so the format tends towards value engines and grindier playstyles. By playing ramp and card draw, you can often progress your game plan much quicker. But if you put ramp and card draw in your deck just because commander decks have ramp and card draw, you run some pretty big risks. You could dilute your game plan. An aggressive creature deck doesn't need as much ramp as long as it can keep the cards flowing. You might pick a tool which doesn't help as much as you want it to. A deck with a big breakpoint at 4 mana, like its commander or another key spell, probably doesn't want 1 or 3 mana ramp. You might misdiagnose a major issue. A deck which consistently floods despite having the right number of lands probably doesn't have too much mana, but it has too few ways to spend it. Now, a long time ago, I was talking about big splashy effects not being the real endpoint they look like. They certainly draw the curtain, don't get me wrong, but they're the face of a deeper mechanism. Torment of Hailfire is a great way to spend a lot of mana and progress the game, but there are others, and you had the mana first. Crater Hoof Behemoth is a great way to convert loads of creatures, but first you need to have loads of creatures. This is why I think Gaia's Cradle sucks, by the way. It only gets crazy when you're already doing things that win the game without it. I'm not saying you should build decks without these types of effect, but rather you should consider them the least important part of winning your games and put more focus into your resources. Now, I hope that's enough detail to help you build around your plan and really facilitate what you want your deck to do. This understanding of resources was really helpful to my growth as a brewer and player. If there's anything you'd like me to cover, let me know in the comments. And until next time, good luck, have fun, and may the best wizard win.